Welcome to the Paving the Way to Soul Love. It's a global online training series. This is training 2, and tonight's training is the true in true love. Training 1, we talked about clearing the path and all of the things that get in the way of this experience of true love. And so tonight, we're actually going to really deepen in what does it mean to have that true love experience. And with that, what we're up to is also a journey into the heart and a journey of connection with the soul. And I'm Joanna Shakti, the Soul Love Mentor. It's how people refer to me, and it came about, I'll share with you a little bit more in a couple of minutes about why I do what I do and how the Soul Love Mentor came to be, because it's not something I would have ever imagined, and yet it is the deepest honor and the reason that I believe I'm on the earth. So thank you for joining me here tonight for this training. The True in True Love is the training that we're up to tonight. How soulmate love and soul partnerships ignite and stay hot, because we want relationships that are happy. We want relationships that are hot. And this and in training 3 is where it starts to get juicy. And it's also where it's going to get really real. If you've watched training 1, you know that this is the real thing, and that it's not, as we'll talk about in one of the myths tonight, it's not all the firecrackers and fireworks and roses, and yet it is the most exquisite, profound, powerful experience that is fulfilling, blissful, joyful, awakening, empowering. And we're going to talk about so much more. So this is the journey that we're on. And to start out, true love, it never dies. And the truth is, it can hurt. This is what I was alluding to just a moment ago. And this idea that, yes, the ecstasy in training 1, I talk about the ecstasy and the agony. And it is, in this case, we want to be real about love is boundless. It's infinite. It is eternal. It doesn't go away. We're afraid we're going to lose it. We're afraid we're never going to get it. But we're going to talk about tonight why that's an illusion. And that the truth is, if you bring you and your willingness and your heart and your soul and a little bit of vulnerability, it's going to be better than anything you've ever experienced before. Better than anything you've ever imagined, even though we know it can hurt. And it's because you know it can hurt that you actually get to move beyond the hurt so much faster. It's really about getting real. As I said, the Soul Love Mentor, if you guys have had a chance to look me up online, you'll actually see that I got a chance to be on America's Got Talent a few years ago. I was the kissing expert, and you'll find me in different places where I've looked at and I get to share, and that's what's really like such a blessing to me, is that I get to share all the aspects of loving and being loved, in bed and out, from dating to relating, from self to divine. And we're going to talk about all that. So a bit more about me as we go along. You are in the right place here, especially if you've found yourself single again, and maybe again, and maybe again, because so many of us keep looking for that true love. And we're going to talk about how to actually have it and have it last. If you're in a relationship and you're having that same old argument again and again and again, you're in the right place. If you try to protect yourself from that pain of love, you're in the right place, because that very protection is keeping you from what you most want. You felt the passion fizzle and the love fade. And we're going to talk about that tonight. And we talked about that in training 1. We're going to touch on it more tonight. We're also going to talk about it in training 3, cultivating conscious chemistry. And another way to know that you are absolutely in the right place is that there's an emptiness. Or maybe it's not an emptiness, but there's something missing. And you are hungry for the depth and the passion and the ecstasy and the intimacy of that true love. So tonight in training 2, I am sharing the myths and the truths of soulmate love. We are getting real tonight. We're going to talk about what destroys it and what bonds it. We're going to talk about how relationships have evolved and why your soul must participate. And we'll dive even deeper into that one next time. We're going to talk about the how-tos. I think we're going to look at 8 key steps in priority order to have your soul partnership be hot, be happy. And we're talking about the number 1 most ignored and most important key in relating and how it gets screwed up and why it's actually going to shock you. So that's what we're up to tonight. I want to just share just a couple of more tidbits. In training 1, I told you a lot about myself. But as I was preparing for this conversation, talking about the true and true love, I really looked back and I remembered when I was a kid, I used to wear this pink t-shirt that said, "If I follow you home, will you keep me?" Like there was a part of me that was longing for love since I was a little girl. And then my parents divorced and my dad left, and my dad was the apple of my eye. And why wasn't I good enough for him to stay? And that's what my child mind made up. And then I came up with, as you heard last time, all kinds of beliefs, all kinds of judgments about men. And then where I really knew I was in trouble on this journey and what began to propel the transformation was the realization that my first husband, who was a great man, could not have loved me enough to fill the empty hole that was in me. I was so trying to get the love from him and to find out that I was okay. And it doesn't work that way. That's not true love. So I learned the hard way what love wasn't, even though that's what I thought it was, and even what I tried to prove it was. And all the ways that I tried to blame the man on the other side of the fence for me. And I had a huge role, and you have a huge role in, and this is the blessing and the curse, as I like to say to so many of my clients, is yes, you are responsible. And yes, because you are responsible, you get to create the love life that you want. And I know some of you will go, well, wait, I've been trying. And the key really is to know the right steps. And nobody teaches this. Nobody teaches us about love. And so this is a really important conversation. And so please take it in, rewatch it, share it with others. This path, the path of soul love. Whoops, I want to go back to that. The path of soul love. It is a path that, as you heard in training 1, is not a destination. It is not a place that we stop. It is not a place that we land. Yes, there's the ideal that we hold, and yet what we want to get is the reality, because the reality is so much juicier than your imagination. This is a path that we continue to walk, and the love gets more and more boundless every single time. The love gets more intense, it gets deeper, it gets more passionate. So we want to talk about this path that you will walk forever, because life is love. And that old saying, love makes the world go round, yeah, it really does. And this is what we're talking about. How do you live into that fullest love? So what happens? Let's start here. We're talking about the true and true love. Well, what happens when you leave the true out? How do you recognize it? And then we're going to talk about what does it look like when the true is there. Well, first, relationships don't last. We do that over and over and over again thing. And so if you're in relationship and you're having that same old argument, sometimes we eventually get sick of it. And it doesn't matter because you keep manifesting the same relationship, the same challenges over and over again, the same types of guys, the same types of challenges. So you disconnect, you pull back, you're friends at best. I watch too many couples that, are taking care of the kids and they're taking care of their own lives, but there's nothing between them. And I know a lot of singles that was their past relationship. So how do we make sure that's not the future for you? You stop having sex. Or it's the run-of-the-mill, let's do it because we should. And that's not what we want. You're trying to keep the peace. You're trying to keep things even. You try to make sure they're happy, and you will do whatever it takes to try to keep that harmony. I said last week in training 1, if you're a peacemaker, you want to be paying attention here. And this is also something that when we really look at it, doesn't matter if we're in relationship or not, there's a loneliness that gets pervasive. And it's not where true love exists. In love, there is not loneliness. Here's another one that might surprise you, but I can claim that this has been one of my patterns in the past. We make it all their responsibility. They did this, they didn't do that, he should have done this. We can look at our exes and we can know exactly why we broke up and what they did. Or we can look at our partners and the things that they're not doing in our relationships that they should be doing. Oh, but the hard part is turning around the mirror and looking into it and going, what's my part? What is my part in the exact dynamic that is happening in our relationship? Or if you're single, what is your part that contributed to the results of that last relationship? As my very, very, very first teacher in a 3-hour Tuesday night workshop said, as I started this journey of love, we are each not 50-50 responsible, but 100-100. We're both 100% responsible for the quality and the quality, the ecstasy, the depth of the connection. We're both 100% responsible. And so here's the other side of that one. We make it all their responsibility, but there's another pattern. I sort of did both of these, is that I went, it's all my fault. I screwed it up. I did something wrong. I should have done that. I should have known better. Why did I do that? And we turn it all and we never look at them and go, wait a second, they're contributing too. Yes, me, but also them. So this is a two-way street and we forget that. But true love, it is a two-way street. And we both acknowledge that. Maybe not always in the moment, but we're both willing to play on that level. And here's another sign. When you feel rejected or abandoned by them, this is another sign that you want to look within. Because here's the thing, they can't reject you and abandon you unless you've rejected and abandoned you. So this, and you'll hear this again in a few moments, you'll hear that we actually have to have this relationship powerfully strong before you can have that full love with another. So this is part of the circle, if you will, of true love. Soulmate love, true love. So another word, if I was going to use a synonym to true love, it would be soul love. It is the love that is an expression of who we are. And we talk about, we want to find our soulmate and we want to be with our soulmate for the rest of our lives. But there's too many myths out there that aren't true. And they're guiding us, they're creating disappointment. They're sending us down the paths that don't work. And you want to find the path that actually leads you to the ecstasy. So let's do a reality check. It's not all magic and roses, as a matter of fact. Soulmate relationships, the truth is it's messy because a soulmate is here to evolve your soul, for your soul, your being, to express more fully on the planet, to express more fully in your relationships with your children, with your beloved, with the community, with your friends, in what your purpose is in the world, in the ways that you contribute. All of it. And it is through the messiness that we actually come into the deeper experiences of love. We'll talk about that more. The idea that that person is always going to be there for you, it's not true. And it's a setup for failure. It's a setup for hurt, because they're human and they've got their own desires and hurts and needs. And sometimes our needs conflict. So the most important thing, and you're going to hear me say this as we close tonight, and again in a different way, but it's really important what we do in the moments where we're not in alignment that deeply impact the quality and the longevity of that relationship. They love you unconditionally. I love that. And yes, we're moving towards that. But the reality is we live in human bodies, and you have to love you unconditionally first before you're going to come anywhere close to receiving the unconditional love of another. And this is a beautiful dance of continuing to let go of all the things that block our love and really come into you, and then be able to receive that love. Conflict, as I was talking about earlier with the magic and the roses and the messiness, the idea that conflict isn't going to happen, that when we get together, everything's going to be smooth sailing. No, it's a setup for heartache and disappointment. And here's the other piece, is flip it the other way around. Celebrate. The truth is we can celebrate the upsets, because when we know how to navigate them, I talk about this in the Loving Soul to Soul program that I do, which is very much about how we're relating, that conflict is essential. It's critical to the deepening and the closeness and what I like to call the communion of our relationships. So embracing that conflict. The idea that there's only one soulmate. You're not looking for one. There are many. And yes, there's likely for most of you, for most of us, one that we choose to marry, one that we choose. And it's not necessary to have a soulmate relationship, but a lot choose that. But even though we choose to marry one, we may have had several soulmate relationships leading up to the one that we choose to marry and make our lifetime partnership. So know that you're not looking for that needle in a haystack. The next 5. Let's put it this way. You need to have it all together in order to find your one. No, masculine or feminine, male or female, you don't need to have it all together. As a matter of fact, we fall in love with our humanness. We fall in love with our vulnerability. And so give up the idea that you have to have it all together to find your soulmate. No, they fall in love with you in your perfection and in your imperfection. That they'll stop loving you if you screw up. Oh, we're gonna make mistakes in relationships. We're gonna do things we wish we hadn't. We're gonna say things we wish we hadn't. And again, what's so important is that you know how to clean up the mess ups. We can wipe up a spill. We can clean up a challenging relationship. And that's what's so important. How do we clean it up? Because you're gonna mess up. The idea that that person over there, when you find the right one, they're gonna fill you up. They're gonna bring you love. That, remember I said, my ex-husband could have never loved me enough for me to feel loved. They can't bring it to you. When you find it in you, then that soulmate relationship can amplify and intensify and make more juicy that love that's already in you. But it's because you've awakened, you've activated the love that is already in you. And I mentioned this earlier, but the thought that you can relax because you're never going to get hurt, you're never going to be rejected, you're never going to be abandoned. Wrong. As a matter of fact, when I do workshops with couples, I will have them look at each other and honestly say, I promise you're going to get hurt. You're going to feel hurt in our relationship. Like, that's the reality. And if we pretend it's not, it's so much worse. Because the truth is, I promise you'll feel hurt. It's a guarantee. And so we embrace it and we dance with it and we come closer because of it. Chemistry. The idea that chemistry is critical, it's a myth. And I'll say this, some chemistry is absolutely necessary. And here's the really interesting part. Too much chemistry, and it's actually all your body, and there's no place for your soul to exist because the chemicals and the hormones are running at such an intense level that you can never get to the real heart connection. And so if it's all body, we're not talking about soulmate love. So these are the myths and the truths. So now let's talk about what is true love. What is soul love? It is not it is not reasonable. It's not logical. It doesn't make sense. And it's not something that you can put a finger on. It is, as we'll talk about in a moment, an experience that you will recognize. It's not about qualities. It's not about this list of who they're going to be or what we're going to do or what we're going to accomplish, what they're going to look like. It's absolutely not the qualities. And it's not all about chemistry, but it is completely authentic, absolutely intimate, and very ecstatic. It's profound. It is often wordless. It unites body, heart, soul. All the pieces of you come into union and unite in this intimacy, uniting body to body, heart to heart. We're moving. When we get into the next training and we talk about the soul in soul sex, there will be a way that we move this energy between us to amplify the experience of the heart, to, yes, have even more pleasure, but it's all because of the union. Soul love brings you home to who you are. It is the experience of being you and being seen as you and acknowledged as you by you first, and then by your beloved and by others in a way that you never experienced before. It is the awakening, the truth of you. And we've talked a lot about why does it matter, but I want to just really touch on it again, because there's a couple of things I hadn't said. And one is that it is exhausting when we are not living in soul love. If you are working so hard to try to find love or keep love or make it work, we're too tired to actually enjoy the pleasure of it. We can't see the pleasure when it actually shows up, and we don't have any energy for sex. So when you're not living in soul love, every part of your life is suffering. And when you are, every part of your life is supported and lifted up. And here's the other thing. We imagine that, we've talked about now a couple times tonight, we've talked about that when the going gets tough, you leave. That over and over and over again. But that's not the path of soul love. The path of soul love is, I said this to somebody recently, one of my clients in the Activating Soul Love program was concerned because of the challenge that was showing up for her. And what would that do to her relationship? And was that a problem with her relationship? No, it's not a problem that the challenges are showing up. It is a blessing. It is a sign of the rightness of the relationship, because it invites you to come into your heart more fully, your body more fully, your pleasure more fully. And sometimes there's the hiccups that we've got to move through, and you don't leave when the going gets tough. Now, are there relationships, I will say this, are there relationships that truly have lived their life? They've lived their life stream? Absolutely. And it's beginning to know you that has that question, should I leave or stay? Should I stay or should I go? Should I leave or should I stay? When you know you and you feel your heart, you'll know the answer to that question. And until you know the answer to that question, it's here. This relationship is serving you. Soul love is liberating. It is freeing. We talk about wanting to be free in relationships. And yet soul love, when we are in a soul partnership, we are in connection, we're in partnership, we have commitments to each other. And yet there's an incredible freedom and a liberation that brings so much energy. It is the gateway to that connection, body, heart, soul, and spirit, in bed and out. And it's where we are treasured, where we are held precious, and we really honor and revere that partner. And even a date, like this is a sacred being across from me, and I get the privilege of spending a few hours with them, or maybe it's an hour, maybe it's a half an hour, maybe it's a multi-day date, but it's a privilege to be with these souls and to remember that. And again, as I said earlier, soul love is where it becomes wordless. You can feel it. It's an experience that you can't describe necessarily, but you know you're having it. And oh, by the way, this is a preview to coming attractions in training 3, but it's also the place where stillness can create intense orgasms like you never imagined before. And yes, stillness. So that's a little bit of a mind challenge probably for many. And the truth is that stillness does create incredible orgasms when we know how to move this soul energy. Okay, so this is soul love, and we're going to talk more about how do we deepen in it in a little bit, but we want to talk about along the way, how do we mess it up? And so we're talking about the destroyers of relationship. And we're going to dive a little bit more deeply into each one of these 3 key destroyers so that you can start recognizing them and shifting the patterns of how you've been sabotaging your dates, your relationships. And also, because here's one of the ways, when I take people through my Soul Love program series, we start with activating soul love. And what we want to do is look at, there's a piece of that, and I mentioned this in training 1, but there's a piece of that that is about the conscious endings, the completion of the past, the forgiveness of yourself, the recognition of the lessons that those past painful relationships brought to you, so that you could step into a relationship that is extraordinary, that is the one that is wordless, that is like this couple that I am particularly thinking about, who say over and over again, they've both done work with me, who say over and over again, we had no idea it could be this way. So we want to know how, this is why we're talking about the mistakes. This is why we're talking about the destroyers, because if you don't realize how you're contributing your 100%, there's no way you can shift that dynamic. So the first one, false expectations. And there are many things that you'll see in a moment that we actually have false expectations about. And it is those expectations that set us up for the heartache, the heartbreak, the breakups, and even the divorces. So we want to get beyond those. We want to get the reality, that reality check. Self-abandonment. We're going to talk about this one in more detail, but I'm going to give you that key right now, that this is the number 1 most important thing you can do in any relationship. It is self-abandonment is not the most important thing, but the self-relationship, because self-abandonment is the number 1 destroyer. I probably should have made it number 1, but it is the number 1 destroyer of intimate relationships. When you abandon you, this dynamic that you want to have with another person cannot work, because you're not actually in the relationship. So we're going to go into more depth in a moment, but this is the most ignored prerequisite: self-love, self-relationship, even more importantly than self-love, honestly. And it is the number 1 destroyer. And we don't relate. We want to be in relationship and then we stop relating. And we're going to talk about what that looks like. But we can't have a relationship if we're not relating. So let's dive in. False expectations. The first one, as we've been talking about through this training, all these false myths, the false beliefs about what love should be, what it looks like, what they should do, what I should do, what they shouldn't do, all the rules and the shoulds. Because those rules and shoulds will never show up the way that you think they are, because there is no two people on the planet. I don't care what kind of relationship you're in. Nobody is going to have the same set of expectations about how we relate. So we've got to be in communication, which is part of relating, which is the third thing that we're going to look at. Oh, false expectations of the opposite sex. For those of you in heterosexual relationships, way too often do women look over there at men and think, why aren't you doing it the way I do it? And men who are upset with women because they're not being more logical, more reasonable. I can't say enough about this. And it is one of the things that, again, we will talk about in cultivating conscious chemistry, because in heterosexual relationships, this difference is part of both the challenge and the passion. And how do we deal with it? But anytime we look over there and go, you should do it like me, we're in trouble, because it's not going to work that way. We are different. And then false expectations. This is another way of looking at shoulds and rules. And we put obligations and demands on our beloveds, on those that we're hanging out with on a date, or in the person that we've chosen to be in relationship with. And here's the problem. The minute that you hold an expectation, the minute that they should do something, you've now got a demand. They are obligated to do it. And generosity, which is a fundamental expression of love, becomes impossible. You put demands on and you actually are killing love, because generosity cannot exist in the face of a demand, an expectation, or an obligation. And generosity is beautiful. Think about the times when someone has been so generous with you, who has given of themselves through word, through action, through deed, through gift. It's beautiful and it's profound. And then the expectations of ourselves. I'm not good enough is one of those words, those phrases that we use and we wonder, did I do something wrong? What if I do this? Are they going to leave? Will they stay? So any way that you put expectations on yourself, it is the same thing. You can't show up as real. And it is real, your soul, your heart, your body, that somebody falls in love with. And again, as we talked about in training 1, it is not the perfection of you. It is the truth of you, beauty and mess, strength and weakness. So now let's talk about self-abandonment. And as I said, the number one destroyer. And it is the place where, why are we talking about a pretzel? But the truth is, it is the place where we twist ourselves into that pretzel, trying to make love work. It is the place where we will do whatever we think they'll like, so they'll ask us out again. Or we'll try to say the right thing to be the good woman or the good man. No, be you. Pretzel twisting zaps love. You settle, because eventually when you settle, you resent. You resent that you're not getting the things that you knew you wanted in the beginning, but you're the one that chose to settle. And I know that idea of, well, it's good for now and it's better than nothing, and some of those other reasons that we settle, but eventually you will never be fulfilled. And that settling is as cruel as it is to you. It is equally, if not more cruel, to the one that you settled for. And then selling yourself out. Anytime that you try to be the good girl, the good boy, that idea that we got as kids, they don't work in relationship. And the idea of being the nice girl or the nice guy, doing it so that they're first, like self-abandonment and them first, they don't go together. They're mutually exclusive. Now, it's not to say that you never put your partner first. You do, but you do it when it's true for you, not when you're selling yourself out because you should put them first, or you don't want to upset them because you don't want to have a fight, or you don't want them to be disappointed and think about leaving you because you're not doing enough. All of those, again, come back to resentment. And resentment, again, it is the huge killer of love. All of these, pretzel twisting, settling, selling yourself out, not sharing your needs, wants, and desires, not being who you are as an authentic masculine or feminine being. And that we will go into much more depth next training. But the essence of any time you are not being you, you build resentment and you kill love. So you, in relationship with you, yes, there's a way that self-love is a part of that, but self-love is not something that we can just point a finger at. But being in relationship with you, we can understand that. And it's just like being in relationship with somebody else. So this is the first step of coming into you and knowing who you are and realizing that you are amazing and so worth falling in love with. You don't relate. You know, just as we were talking about in self-abandonment, this is one of the ways that you do one and you've actually got a double whammy because you're not actually in relationship. Who's here? Because I'm not telling you what I actually need. I'm not telling you what actually turns me on. I'm hiding that fantasy. I'm hiding that actual desire that I have, or as I speak about in one of the embodiment elements in activating soul love, for those that are single, we might not tell somebody that we're looking to get married, that that's our desire, or that we want to have kids. And then we imagine that we're going to change their mind when they say that's not a fit. Oh, that's a setup for failure. We must speak and share all the time, regularly, consistently, on dates and through 40, 50 years of marriage. We've got to communicate. And oh, by the way, the language of intimacy is emotions. And we are so taught not to feel our emotions. As a matter of fact, we're taught to numb them, to sell them, to do anything to get away from those emotions. And that's society. And there is nothing more exquisite than falling in love through emotions. And it is what keeps that love going deeper and deeper and deeper over time. So developing your language, your vocabulary, your capacity for emotional conversation. And yes, gentlemen, I can almost feel you going, no. And I can tell you, when I work with men and the men in my world, they don't lose who they are as their masculine being. They don't stop being that presence of masculinity. But in that presence, they open their heart. And that, by the way, is what has a woman, again, for heterosexual relationships, has a woman fall in love and melt. Your presence and your heart. So, emotions, critical part of connecting and relating. You've heard that one enough. I'm not even going to talk about it. But the idea of avoiding conflict is not going to put you into relationship. And then we deprioritize. Like we think that we can just keep going about life and doing these things and taking care of the kids and taking care of that problem and making sure the boss is happy and making sure the in-laws are happy and mom's happy and the neighbors are happy and the PTA, and we can come up with a zillion things. And then where's relationship? It's not on the priority list. And so we must prioritize relationship so that there's a chance to connect. And our physical intimacy is as important as our emotional intimacy. So we must create space for that and work through the challenges that get in the way of having that true physical intimacy as well. on a regular basis. The journey from head to heart. It is the journey from intellect to living it, to come into the place, this evolution of more and more and more of you available, deeper and deeper and deeper love and connection and communion with a partner, deeper and deeper pleasure and ecstasy and oneness. Like, what was that we just shared? Because you've let down the barriers to the fullness. Because really, as you get out into that third phase, that is the place where you've not been before, probably ever, or maybe in moments. But how do you recreate that consciously, intentionally? And oh, by the way, this is where the truth is, as we evolve through this, we have to keep visiting each of these, because as we evolve into, we want more ecstasy. We've touched it, we've expanded into it, now I want more. Well, in order to have more ecstasy, we actually have to now expand our capacity for intimacy. And to expand our capacity for intimacy, we have to expand our capacity for authenticity. So there is a deepening and a deepening and a deepening, and more and more and more as we journey through this evolution of love and your soul's expression. It starts with you. It starts with activating the soul love in you. And so these steps just remind you, activate the soul love in you that brings out your fullest expression of you. Then relate, love soul to soul to create that experience of ecstatic intimacy. And then live and love in that ecstasy, ecstatic ecstasy from the fulfillment, the passion, the desire, the juice of life and love. It becomes not just a relationship, but a life of love. Let's talk about the 5 major love mistakes. The first one, you fall in love and you make those assumptions and expectations and you fall in love based on those. And it's not going to work. So we touched on this one tonight. It won't work when you bring the expectations and assumptions to the relationship. Here's another one. And I touched on this. We're going to go deeper next time. You think you have to be equal to be a happy and conscious couple, to be successful. No, we're going to talk about actually why equality builds barriers and independence kills passion. It's shocking, but it's absolutely true. We have to learn what inner dependence looks like and live it. You expect the opposite sex to behave like you. They don't. And you will be frustrated. We so often look out there and think they're going to do the same thing that we do. They're not. They're absolutely not. And this will again destroy love. Let's talk about sexuality. I talked about love and fully expressing your soul. Well, the reality is you've got to fully express your sexuality too. We can't hide that either. We can't hold our faults. We can't hide our faults, I should say. We can't hide our sexuality. We can't pretend that it's not who we are. I can tell you so many men that have been through my programs that I have worked with, and they're like, oh my God, I would never say that. And then they find out that it's okay to say that, because this is part of true love. This is about real love, where we're not hiding. And you think you can love another without fully loving you. You have to realize that this love is alive, it's vibrant, it is who you are. And when you feel, embody, express who you are as this love, the love that you can then enjoy and experience and go deeper in with a beloved is extraordinary. The bonds. So those are the mistakes. Let's talk about the bonds. One of the things that we do in the Loving Soul to Soul program, which is the second program in the series, we build your shared soul purpose of relationship vision. And this, we come in so many times in partnerships and we don't know really why we're there. We don't really know why we chose relationship. It's just what we're supposed to do. And it feels good. The truth is it feels good to be in love. The truth is it feels good to have great sex. But without that shared vision, we don't have the same level of bonding. And so you want to come into a shared experience. And that is one of the qualities that's really unique about the way that I share vision, both for singles and for couples. It is experiential. It is not about qualities. Heartfelt agreements. This is about the conscious beginnings. This is about communication. This is about telling the truth about how we're going to navigate those inevitable ups and downs of relationship. And we can actually talk about those, and then we can, not with judgment, not with, oh, you screwed up, because we're all going to screw up. You didn't do it the way you were supposed to. I forgive you, and let's come back to our agreements. So we want to set those up in a conscious beginnings ritual. Vulnerability. We fall in love with humanness. It is through intimacy. Into me you see. Into you I see. And the realness of that exposure. That's the bond of love. The commitment to your soul. That you won't be anything other than you in that relationship. Because the moment that you start being something other than you, or pretending that what you need, want, or desire, what you're willing to do, what you're not willing to do, the moment that you tell even the littlest white lie, you've started to tear down the love. And love itself, emanating in this person, and then coming together. Love itself is the bond. And how does then this all get put together in that hot, passionate, deeply loving, ecstatically intimate soul partnership? First and foremost. And literally, we're walking down these step by step, because as you've heard throughout this training on true love, honor yourself. You are the number one person in that relationship, and the relationship with you is the number one relationship in life. Because without this relationship, you can't have this one, nor any other. And so honoring yourself, everything about you. And yes, you can still honor your partner. They are not mutually exclusive. I know that the mind can make it that way. It's like my way or your way, but we can't have it both ways. But the truth is you can. The truth is you can. You must commit to relating. Because if you don't choose to relate, and including emotionally, you can't have a soul partnership. The authenticity is critical in that relating, in that communicating. All of you, who you are, exactly as who you are. Celebrate your partner. Oh my God, we are so good at complaining about our partners. We are so good at knowing how they screwed up. We are so good at picking on them. We must celebrate them. We must come into, yes, I love this about you, remembering. An incredible practice for each morning is to start your day with a grateful heart. What are the things that you are most grateful for in life? And what are the things that you are most grateful for in love? And singles, you can do this too. It is about what are you grateful for in the experience of loving. And oh, by the way, as part of that visioning, and again, we get into this in much, much, much more depth in both the Activating Soul Love and Loving Soul to Soul programs, but your vision and your ability to feel into the pleasure of the relationship that you want to attract will attract that relationship so much faster, and a relationship that is so much more in alignment with your soul because you are feeling it. So celebrate love, whether you are a single or you are a couple, and it will absolutely increase the momentum of your journey towards the ecstatic love. Embrace conflict. It is your soul's work. That conflict is here for you to have a better life and a better relationship. If you run from it, you will stay stuck in the pain. If you embrace it, you will absolutely be set free. Your freedom to love and be loved absolutely correlates to your willingness to embrace conflict and challenge. Resolve the past, not the paste, resolve the past. And that's what we talked about in training 1, where we all must leave the baggage behind and make sure we're not creating new baggage. So resolve the hurts, resolve the heartaches, forgive, and come to that place of reunion and communion. Play together. We must have joy. There are moments that life is challenging, but we must play. We must enjoy ourselves, life, and each other. Play in bed, play out of bed, play in nature, play in the kitchen, laugh together, play together. One of my favorite sayings is, where there's laughter, there's God. It's the divine soul partnership. Where there's seriousness, there's ego. And it is anything but true love. And oh, by the way, as we'll talk about in Cultivating Conscious Chemistry, we must let that passion soar. We must let the physical intimacy come through and be just as passionate and just as intimate as our heart loving and our play. So these are the how-tos of soul partnership. And soul love is meant for you. I get that question way too often. I don't know, maybe it's not my life, maybe it's not meant for me in this lifetime. Maybe I don't have what it takes. All of those reasons are false. There are ways that your mind just says, it's okay for me to be here and not do the work. But as I mentioned earlier, if you do what you've always done, you will get what you've always gotten, but you have the power. Whether you work with me or someone else, it doesn't actually matter. But simply that choice to commit to your soul's love and your path in this life, why we're on this earth, is to love and be loved. So choose for you, what's your next step? This is the journey. We start with you. We come into relating and we come into union. We come into the ecstasy. And when we want more ecstasy, we bring more intimacy. And when we want more intimacy, we bring more authenticity. Training 3 coming up next week. We're talking about cultivating conscious chemistry. We're going to talk about how much chemistry is actually important and why relationships don't have enough spark or sometimes zero spark. We're going to talk about why in heterosexual relationships, the opposite sex can drive you crazy and turn you on all at once, and why that's actually really important and why it's essential. So how to prevent, we're going to very specifically talk about how to prevent the friend and the roommate zone, that syndrome that happens to way too many relationships these days. We're going to talk in depth about that. We're going to talk about why equal marriages aren't typically the best marriages, and why equal relationships usually have less sex. And we're going to talk about the masculine and the feminine and how those energies, regardless, you'll hear this, regardless of whether you're in a heterosexual relationship or a same-sex relationship, those two energies must play together, and they actually play within us and they play between us, and they are totally relevant to how much good sex we have. And we're going to talk about soul sex. What does that mean? And the myths actually of soul sex, like, oh, if I do this sacred sex thing or this sacred sexuality thing, I'm not going to have good sex anymore. Yeah, that's a myth. So we're going to get real about soul sex and a whole lot more. So take this time to be with your own heart. Reflect on your past relationships. Reflect on what you truly desire. Reflect on your current relationship if you're in one. Reflect on how you're dating if you're dating. And allow yourself to be real and to be vulnerable. To stop blaming. and start owning that you have 100% responsibility, which I know, like part of me goes, I don't want to look at myself. It's so much easier to blame, but it isn't. And it is the place where we know beyond any question, beyond any doubt, that we can create the kind of relationship that we've always wanted. You can have the relationship that your soul has dreamed of. You've fallen asleep hoping for. Maybe you've put wedding cake under your pillow. I think women do this more than men. I don't even know if people still do it anymore, but I know when I was younger, it was like we'd fall asleep, we'd have a dream about our soulmate and who we were going to marry. It doesn't matter where you are on this journey of soul love. What matters is that you take the next step for you and you honor your heart and you honor your soul. I look forward to seeing you next week. I send you huge blessings. The word namaste means the divine in me sees and acknowledges the divine in you. And so I offer you a sincere namaste. Thank you for being here. I will see you next week. I am Joanna Shakti, the Soul Love Mentor.